Security to VIP lounge. We have a situation. The woman's voice snapped through the room like a whip. Sylvia Harper didn't whisper. She didn't pull Jalen aside. She said it loud, for everyone to hear. All eyes turned. The elegant hush of the first-class lounge, the soft jazz, the clinking of espresso cups, the polite murmurs, suddenly froze into silence. Even the barista behind the marble counter paused mid-steam. Sylvia stood tall in her navy blue Aerocrest uniform, arms folded, gold wings pinned neatly over her chest. Her mouth curled in disdain as she stared down a teenage boy seated alone near the corner window. This boy doesn't belong here. The boy, Jalen Mercer, 15, didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked up, stunned. "I'm with the Future Aviators program," he said, voice low but clear. "Miss Janine from Outreach gave me this badge. She told me I could wait here until the orientation started." Sylvia didn't even glance at the badge. She waved him off like a bug. "And I told you this isn't a waiting room for children. This is first class, not some community center." Jalen's stomach turned. He could feel the heat rising to his ears. "I wasn't trying to—" She stepped forward, close enough for him to smell her citrus perfume. "Give me the badge," she said sharply. Jalen hesitated, then unclipped it from his collar and held it out. Sylvia snatched it with 2 fingers like it was dirty laundry. She turned it over, then smirked as if she'd just uncovered a secret. "This is printed," she muttered. "Not encoded. You seriously thought this would pass? It's what they gave me. Don't play games. I've been in this job 20 years. I know fake credentials when I see them." She clicked her radio again. "Unit 4, confirmed. Unauthorized mail in lounge. Likely forged ID, suspected security breach. Tell us where you're watching from. Would you have stood up, or would you have sat quietly, like Jalen did? Because 10 minutes from now, $7.2 billion will disappear from this airline's operating accounts. But right now, no one knows that." The businessman across the room looked up from his iPad. A woman near the espresso bar slowly pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll, but watching. Jalen stood. His heart was thumping so loud he swore they could hear it. His palms felt sticky. His mouth was dry. He had done everything right, checked in properly, cleared security, given the badge at the front counter, smiled, said please and thank you, sat quietly, waited. And yet here he was, being stared at like a thief. "Ma'am, please," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I haven't done anything wrong. You can call Miss Janine. She walked me in here herself. The badge has my name on it. You think anyone in this lounge cares what your name is?" Sylvia Harper rolled her eyes and raised her voice. "You think you can just walk into a first-class lounge and sit wherever you want, flash a cheap printed badge, and people will treat you like you belong?" She paused, then added, "Let me guess. Your uncle's the CEO?" There were small chuckles from the far table. One of the other attendants looked away. Nobody stepped in. Jalen looked at his phone. One message. No noise. Just a short, desperate plea. "They called security on me. Said my badge is fake. I don't know what to do. Sent." He didn't say who he sent it to. No one asked. They just saw a quiet black kid standing still in a luxury space, trying not to cry. 3 minutes later, 2 airport security guards entered the lounge. Sylvia straightened like a queen delivering a verdict. "That's him," she said. "He was sitting there, alone. No escort, no credentials. Says he's part of some future pilot program. Looked suspicious from the moment I saw him." One of the officers turned to Jalen. "Sir, may we see your ID?" Jalen nodded, handing over both his school ID and the program badge. They examined them in silence. The taller guard glanced back at Sylvia. "You said this was fake." She shrugged. "It's obviously not registered. Who hands out access to first-class lounges with no scan code?" "Actually," Jalen said softly, "Miss Janine said they made them manually for the students this year. Her team printed them." "I'm sorry, young man," the second officer interrupted. "We'll need to take you to a holding area to verify your identity and the authorization." Jalen's voice cracked. "I didn't do anything." The taller guard softened slightly. "We just need to confirm your story. It'll be quick." Sylvia smirked. "Let this be a lesson." Jalen's hands trembled. He looked down at the message he sent, still unread. He thought of his Aunt Cassandra, back in New York. What would she do? Probably exactly what she was doing now. Sylvia Harper had no idea who the boy was, and she definitely had no idea who just received that message. In a corner office 2,800 miles away, Cassandra Mercer glanced at her phone. One short text from her nephew. No drama, no all-caps panic. Just calm, precise words. Her expression didn't change. She simply turned to her assistant and said, "Pull liquidity from AeroCrest, freeze it all. And while you're at it, activate the sector-wide protocol, category red." Her assistant paled. "Right now?" Cassandra nodded. "Right now." 10 minutes later, across 13 airports, every VIP lounge under AeroCrest Airlines went dark. Jalen Mercer was still standing in that one. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who humiliated him was about to lose her career, and so was the system that had allowed it. Jalen's hands were cold. Even though the air inside the VIP lounge was warm and still, he felt like he was standing outside in the dead of winter. The eyes on him, disapproving, dismissive, uncomfortable, were sharper than any wind. The two security officers flanked him now, not quite threatening but close, too close. His backpack sat untouched by his feet. One of them, Officer Mendoza, the one who looked more tired than angry, had taken his badge and was running it through a handheld scanner. The other, Officer Keene, just watched him. Jalen wasn't handcuffed, wasn't being yelled at, but he knew what this looked like. To the people in the room, he was no longer a guest. He was a problem, a threat. Just another situation handled before brunch. He lowered his eyes, focused on the edge of the carpet. It was patterned in navy and gold, matching the AeroCrest branding with tiny triangles woven in that looked like arrows pointing outward, like they were trying to tell him to leave. A few chairs away, Sylvia Harper still stood proudly, arms crossed like a store manager who just caught a shoplifter. "That badge is not real," she said to no one in particular. "No barcode, no record in our system. I know what I'm looking at." Jalen didn't speak. He didn't look at her. Instead, he kept replaying the morning in his head. 4 hours earlier, Oakland. Jalen woke up before sunrise, couldn't sleep. His suitcase had been packed for days. Uniform polo folded neatly, lanyard, ID badge, a printout of the day's orientation schedule, and a copy of the FAA's student handbook that he read like it was scripture. His mom made him breakfast but barely touched her coffee. His dad, usually the calm one, double-checked the shuttle reservation, even though they'd already confirmed it twice. The whole kitchen buzzed with nervous energy. But Jalen? He felt ready. This was what he'd worked for. His dream had a runway now. Ever since he was 6, he'd been obsessed with airplanes. Not just flying them, understanding them. He could draw out full cross-sections of a Boeing 737 from memory before he ever learned algebra. He stayed up late studying wing loading ratios, memorized call signs of major commercial flights, and built flight simulator setups in his bedroom from old computer parts. But this opportunity? This was real. AeroCrest's Future Aviators Initiative wasn't some summer camp. It was a partnership with the FAA, designed to groom the next generation of pilots from underrepresented communities. Only 12 students were chosen this year. Jalen was the youngest, and, far as he knew, the only black student. The moment he walked into the Seattle terminal that morning, he felt it. The grandeur of the industry he loved. The glass walls, the white floors, the aircraft parked like giants sleeping under the early morning sun. He even got to walk past the cockpit of an AeroCrest Dreamliner, something he never thought would happen this early in his life. One of the co-pilots smiled at him and said, "You'll be in this seat one day." Jalen held on to that moment all the way to the lounge, until Sylvia Harper took it from him. Now, back in the present. Beep! The scanner let out a short chirp. Officer Mendoza glanced at the screen. "Well," he muttered, "it's not fake." Sylvia's face stiffened. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The badge is valid. It matches the program's roster. Shows cleared for lounge access, issued by Janine Lau with Horizon Outreach." Mendoza looked at Jalen for the first time. Really looked. "You said Janine brought you here herself?" Jalen nodded, slow. "Yes, sir. She told me to wait here while she ran to the check-in desk. I didn't move." Keen scratched the back of his neck, uneasy. "He's just a kid," he mumbled under his breath. Sylvia's voice cracked through again. "Well, how was I supposed to know that? The badge looked unofficial. He was alone. What if he was someone trying to gather intel on crew operations?" "Intel?" Keen blinked. "Ma'am, he's wearing braces. And a future aviator t-shirt," Mendoza added flatly. Jalen said nothing. It didn't matter anymore. Even with the badge verified, the damage was done. The stares didn't stop. No one apologized. No one said, "We're sorry for assuming." They just shifted in their seats, glanced away, pretended it hadn't happened. That was the part that hurt most. "Let's confirm with Janine just to close the loop," Mendoza said, already dialing. Sylvia huffed. "Fine. But next time, maybe they should think twice about who they let wander in here with unverified access." And just like that, she turned and walked away, like the whole thing hadn't happened. Like Jalen was supposed to go back to his seat and sip sparkling water and pretend none of it had happened either. Jalen reached down and picked up his bag. He didn't sit, didn't drink. He walked to a corner of the room and stood with his back to the window, trying to breathe. He remembered what his dad told him once. After a teacher falsely accused him of cheating because his test score was too high to be real. "They don't get to define you, son, but they'll try. So don't waste your fire proving you're innocent. Save it for proving you're excellent." That's what he was trying to do now. Just breathe. Just wait. His phone buzzed. One new message. Read. No reply. But that was all he needed. Thousands of miles away, Cassandra Mercer was already moving. Her response wouldn't come in words. It would come in liquidity freezes, in system flags, in reputation collapse. 10 minutes passed. Then something strange happened. The lounge lights flickered, once, then again. A quiet announcement buzzed over the PA system. "Attention! Lounge operations for Aerocrest Airlines are temporarily suspended for maintenance review. Please proceed to Terminal C for alternate accommodations." The staff looked around, confused. Passengers grumbled. One of the attendants picked up the desk phone and frowned. "System just revoked our access badges," she said. "It's locked us out." "What?" "All of them. All terminals. It's not just this lounge." Jalen slowly turned back around. No one was looking at him now, because now they were panicking. Sylvia reappeared from the hallway, her face no longer smug. "What's going on?" The other attendant shook her head. "We're offline. Everything." Mendoza's radio crackled. Then came the voice they weren't expecting. "This is Tower Control. Flag issued by Veritas Capital. All Aerocrest lounge operations suspended nationwide. FAA has been notified." Mendoza looked at Jalen. Jalen looked back, calm. And for the first time since entering that lounge, he smiled. Jalen didn't run. He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch when the lounge doors shut behind him, with 2 security guards still inside gathering statements. He just walked. The sting of what happened still pressed against his chest, like a weight no 15-year-old should carry. But if there was one thing Aunt Cassandra had taught him, it was this. Control the moment. Let them reveal themselves first. He wasn't sure exactly what she meant when she said it last Thanksgiving. But now he understood. Jalen made his way past the escalators and into Terminal C, where the Future Aviators program was just beginning check-in. His name was already on the list. He'd done everything right. They were expecting him. So why did it feel like he'd been shoved out of somewhere he'd earned a seat in? "Jalen?" He turned. Janine Lau, the program coordinator, practically flew toward him. Her face looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God, are you okay? I went back to the lounge and they said you were escorted out? By security?" Jalen shrugged gently. "I'm all right. Why didn't you call me or text me? I didn't want to make it a thing, but it was already a thing." Janine's phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. She glanced down, and her face drained of color. "Oh no. What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. Dozens of notifications lit up, but one headline stood out. Veritas Capital halts 7.2 B in aviation funding after teen removed from lounge. Jalen's eyebrows rose slowly. "Already?" Janine didn't answer. She was too busy watching her phone buzz like a beehive. Mentions, shares, hashtags. Let him fly. Not a forgery. Flight justice. Then she said something that hit harder than anything else that day. "They know who you are, Jalen." Back in the first-class lounge, Sylvia Harper was no longer standing proud. Her badge access had been cut within minutes, her comms silenced, her terminal screen locked. Two senior AeroCrest officials stood beside her now, one from internal ethics, the other from brand risk. "We need you to hand over your flight log device," one of them said, "and remain available for immediate questioning." Sylvia scoffed. "Is this about the kid? I followed protocol." The other executive didn't blink. "That boy was pre-cleared under the Future Aviators Initiative. Not only did you override access you weren't authorized to reject, I thought it was fake. You also radioed in a false security alert. That's a federal infraction, Ms. Harper." Sylvia's breath caught. Wait, this is ridiculous. I've worked for this airline for 19 years. I've served prime ministers, senators, you name it. I've had to screen out dozens of threats. And yet," the woman cut her off, "this one happened to be a black teenager, alone, quiet, wearing a program badge." Sylvia opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. She didn't know what to say. Her hands fell to her sides as they politely, but firmly, escorted her to the back hallway. As they disappeared behind frosted glass, a passenger watching from nearby murmured, "About time." Meanwhile, in a high-rise overlooking downtown Manhattan, the offices of Veritas Aviation Fund were operating at DEFCON 1. Cassandra Mercer, dressed in a charcoal blazer with no jewelry, leaned back in her chair as a dozen department heads briefed her via Zoom. The tone was clinical, sharp. By 10:14 a.m. Eastern, we confirmed withdrawal of 7.2 B from AeroCrest Associated Financial Corridors. We're also rerouting 80% of Q3 lounge funding to Delta Sky and Gatewave subsidiaries. "Any resistance?" Cassandra asked calmly. "None. They saw your name on the freeze." "Good." She glanced at the screen. Her nephew's face, caught in a blurry photo from someone's phone, was now the center of national headlines. Her voice didn't rise, but the room quieted further as she spoke. "Prepare a statement. Do not use terms like incident or misunderstanding. This was a calculated act of humiliation, and it will be addressed as such." One assistant raised their hand. "Should we go public with your relation to the victim?" Cassandra didn't hesitate. "Not yet. Let the world care about him before they know whose blood he carries." Back in Seattle, Jalen sat alone in a side hall near Gate C9. He watched the press conference unfold live on Janine's iPad. A reporter asked, "Why such a harsh reaction for one lounge dispute?" The spokesperson replied with poise, "This wasn't just a lounge. It was a message. A message that certain people, no matter how prepared, how qualified, or how polite, they still get treated like intruders. And sometimes," she added, "those intruders come from the families who fund your survival." Janine turned to him. "You okay?" Jalen nodded, but didn't say anything. He wasn't mad. He wasn't even sad anymore. He was calculating. They didn't know what they'd just woken up, and maybe they still didn't. At 3:12 p.m., AeroCrest CEO Leonard Karp stepped out to a podium in front of their Seattle headquarters. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. He adjusted his tie, face looked pale. "We're reviewing the matter thoroughly," he began, "and we've reached out to the family involved. This does not reflect the values." His phone buzzed mid-sentence. He looked down, blinked, then went visibly stiff. Then he turned, whispered something to his advisor, and walked off the stage. The live stream ended. Reporters gasped. Twitter exploded. 15 minutes later, Jalen's phone lit up. From Aunt Cassandra. "You handled yourself like a pilot today. Calm under pressure. The rest, we'll handle." He smiled, just a little, then looked up. The skies above the runway were starting to open. That afternoon, TSA agents quietly visited every Aerocrest lounge across the West Coast, not to remove passengers, but to quietly deliver sealed letters to managers. By evening, Sylvia Harper's employment was suspended. By midnight, every lounge in Aerocrest's first-class network had been taken offline for federal audit. And by morning, a new internal policy had been leaked. All personnel with guest authority must complete bias certification and acknowledgement of Veritas trust standards before reinstatement. The skies hadn't just shifted. They had been recalibrated. By the time Jalen boarded his flight the next morning, the world was a very different place. The seat was still in economy. No one had upgraded him. No one had rolled out a red carpet. But every person who looked his way wore a different expression now, quiet, careful, a mix of guilt and something closer to fear. Not of him, of what he represented. Janine had insisted on flying with him, sitting 2 rows back. She didn't say much, but her eyes never left him, like she knew something might still explode. The flight took off. No incidents, no glares, not even a sideways glance from the crew. It wasn't peace. It was tension wrapped in courtesy. But Jalen welcomed it, because he knew what was coming. 6 hours earlier, in a marble-floored conference room in Washington, D.C., Cassandra Mercer sat with 2 senators, a federal ethics chief, and a former transportation secretary. On the large screen behind her was a slideshow titled, "Bias at 30,000 Feet, The Hidden Architecture of Discrimination in U.S. Aviation." Slide by slide, Cassandra walked them through what Veritas had quietly uncovered over the past year. Microaggressions in boarding, digital profiling in airline apps, incident reporting inconsistencies, crew retaliation trends. And now, they had a face for it. Jalen's. "Are you sure we're not overcorrecting?" asked one senator. "One incident, and now a $7.2 billion freeze?" Cassandra turned to him without flinching. "Senator, this wasn't overcorrection. It was exposure. What happened to my nephew wasn't isolated. It was simply the first time the system messed with the wrong bloodline." Dead silence. Then the former secretary leaned forward. "What's your recommendation?" Cassandra didn't hesitate. "You want your funding back? You sign on to the Veritas Passenger Rights Accord. You install bias monitoring AIs on every major carrier. You adopt our Flight Justice Index. And you do it before the next fiscal quarter, or we'll make sure every shareholder in the game knows who's still playing by 1950 rules." The ethics chief nodded slowly. "We'll draft a proposal." Cassandra stood. "Don't take too long. Your planes fly because we fund the runways. And that tap, it's still off." Back on the ground in Seattle, Sylvia Harper sat in a private review room, her ID badge confiscated, her name already trending on social media, for all the wrong reasons. No one would speak to her now. Even the union rep had called in sick. Across from her sat an HR director and a corporate investigator. They played the video again, her voice barking at a boy, accusing him, snatching his pass. "Would you like to revise your statement?" Sylvia stared at the screen. "I didn't know who he was." "Why did that matter?" Silence. "Did you see him as a threat?" Another pause. "Or just not worth the benefit of the doubt?" Sylvia's lips parted, then closed. She had nothing. Outside the room, the corporate hallway buzzed with reporters. Aerocrest had tried to contain the story, but it had gone federal. The DOJ had opened a civil rights investigation that morning, and Aerocrest was the test case. Meanwhile, the media frenzy reached a new high when Veritas finally confirmed the name of the teen. And the hashtag changed. From hashtag #LetHimFly to #MercerLine, a legacy family name, linked to federal funding, tech patents, and aviation reform. News anchors dug up old photos of Jalen with Cassandra at STEM conferences, interviewed his middle school teachers, replayed his science fair victory from 3 years ago where he built a simulated air traffic control tower from recycled parts. He had always been flying. They just hadn't seen him. At 2:07 p.m., Cassandra held a press conference on the steps of the FAA, not in anger, not to gloat, but to deliver something heavier. "I want to make one thing clear," she said. "This isn't about vengeance. This is about vision." Jalen didn't ask for special treatment. He earned his place. What failed wasn't a person. It was a structure. And when structures fail, we redesign them. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned in. "We've spent too long pretending bias doesn't fly first class. That stops today." She ended with a quiet nod, stepped off the podium, and disappeared into the black car waiting at the curb. Jalen's flight landed on time. He stepped off quietly, bag in hand. There was no applause, no welcome committee. Just his aunt waiting near baggage claim, arms folded, eyes softer than usual. "You did good," she said. "I didn't do anything. You did exactly what they didn't expect," she smiled. "You endured." Jalen looked around the terminal, the screens, the people, and for the first time in hours, he took a deep breath. Not because it was over, but because now he had altitude. And from up here, the system looked very small. It started with a delay. Not a major one. Just 8 minutes. At first, people at JFK assumed it was weather. In LAX, they blamed air traffic congestion. But by the time 5 more international airports posted sudden ground holds for all domestic AeroCrest flights, the industry knew something was wrong. Veritas had gone silent. And when Veritas goes silent, the towers follow. Inside the Flight Operations Center in Atlanta, AeroCrest executives huddled around an emergency call with the FAA, their voices tight and clipped. "We're seeing dropouts in our automated coordination systems. Veritas AI isn't responding." "Because it's not deployed anymore," the voice from Washington replied. "You lost access to the network at 8:01 a.m. Eastern. That system manages 62% of our traffic flow. Then you should have treated the co-author of its deployment charter a lot better." Silence. By noon, the headlines were everywhere. Aviation tech firm Veritas suspends services to AeroCrest over bias scandal. 3.1 B inbound capital deal on hold pending DOJ inquiry. FAA declines to intervene. This is a private sector reckoning. Inside Cassandra Mercer's office, things were far from quiet. Every line on her phone was blinking. Every staffer was fielding calls from investors, media, government agencies, and 3 rival airlines, practically begging for exclusive partnership deals. Cassandra, however, remained focused. She looked over the internal audit from Veritas's ethics division, paused at the highlighted section, and picked up her phone. "Patch me through to the CEO of AeroCrest." A few seconds later, a shaky voice came through. "Ms. Mercer, I want to apologize personally for everything your nephew—" "No need," Cassandra said flatly. "This isn't personal. This is structural. And I'm calling to give you one final chance to retain access to our infrastructure." "Yes, anything. What do you need?" "I need you to resign." There was a long pause. "That's not something I can do unilaterally." "Then you've already made your choice." She hung up. At the same time, Jalen was in the cafeteria of his school back in D.C., surrounded by friends who no longer saw him as just a quiet kid with an interest in planes. Some stared, some whispered, but none mocked him. A boy who used to throw paper balls at Jalen during lunch now slid a chair beside him. "Yo, I saw the video. You really stayed calm the whole time?" Jalen just shrugged. "Didn't feel like I had a choice." "You got superpowers or something?" Jalen smiled slightly. "Just discipline." Across the room, a teacher leaned against the wall, watching the scene. Later that day, that same teacher would call Cassandra and say, "Whatever you're doing, don't stop. These kids are watching. They're learning what dignity looks like. At 2:30 p.m., a spontaneous protest broke out outside Aerocrest headquarters in Dallas. It wasn't organized by any official group. It started with a single woman, black, late 60s, holding up a cardboard sign with Jalen's face on it. It read, "I fly because he endured." Within the hour, dozens joined her. By evening, it became hundreds. And just as the sun dipped behind the skyline, someone projected a massive message on the glass facade of the headquarters. "Welcome to Mercer Airspace." The next morning, Aerocrest stock dropped 17%. In a closed-door meeting with the Aerocrest board of directors, the writing was on the wall. The general counsel laid out their liabilities. The CFO warned of frozen assets. And finally, someone asked, "What happens if Veritas never reinstates access?" A junior executive, new, quiet, but perceptive, spoke for the first time. "They won't. This isn't a negotiation. It's a rebalancing." Heads turned. The board chair exhaled. "We need a new CEO, someone they'll respect, someone who understands what Cassandra Mercer stands for." One voice from the back added quietly, "Maybe someone she helped train." At 6:03 p.m., Cassandra received an encrypted message from Aerocrest. "We accept your terms. Full compliance. Resignation effective midnight." She stared at it for a long moment, then forwarded it to the DOJ, the FAA, and Jalen. That evening, Jalen sat on the porch with Cassandra, watching planes trace silent lines across the evening sky. "You really shut them down?" he asked. "No," she said. "You did. I just made sure it echoed." Jalen looked up at the sky. "It feels different now." "It is," she replied. "It always feels different when the system blinks first." He laughed softly, but then his face turned thoughtful. "Do you think it'll last?" Cassandra didn't answer right away. Then, "It'll last as long as people like you keep flying, with your name, your silence, your spine." He nodded. And for the first time in his life, Jalen didn't feel like a passenger. He felt like the pilot. It wasn't just Aerocrest anymore. That became clear exactly 5 days after Cassandra Mercer flipped the switch. Delta West, Sky North, and Meridian Air, 3 of the biggest domestic carriers, woke up to an unpleasant surprise. Their Flight Justice Index scores had plummeted. Veritas had silently begun its rollout across the industry. What had started as one boy's mistreatment had become an algorithmic storm, recalibrating who got to fly, who got to lead, and who got shut down. And the ripple didn't stop at boarding gates. Washington, D.C. Senator Lorraine Park leaned over her desk, frowning as she read the memo from her policy advisor. A line was highlighted in red. FAA reviewing all airport funding contracts with mandatory equity clauses proposed by Veritas Systems. She looked up. This would change everything. Her advisor nodded. That's the point. Park stood slowly, walking to the window. Her phone buzzed. It was the Secretary of Transportation. "Lorraine," his voice came through. "It's happening. Mercer just got 3 regional boards to sign on. If we don't move, we'll look like we're resisting justice." Park inhaled deeply. "Draft the amendment and make sure it bears Jalen's name." At Veritas HQ, Cassandra stood in front of a wall of monitors, each displaying live ethical scoring data from airports around the world. A blinking red dot appeared over Miami, another in Phoenix, a third in Heathrow. She tapped a tablet and brought up live cabin footage, fully encrypted, AI blurred, privacy protected, flagged not by humans, but by machine learning trained to spot verbal abuse, unfair seat changes, racial profiling. It had begun. And for the first time in aviation history, the passengers weren't powerless. They had metrics, they had voice, they had receipts. At Jalen's school, he wasn't used to this. The sudden whispers of admiration. The teachers asking him to say a few words at assemblies. A local news crew trying to interview him during study hall. He didn't like it. "I didn't do anything," he told his aunt that evening over dinner. "You showed restraint in the face of ignorance," Cassandra replied. "That's not nothing. But now people treat me like I'm untouchable, like I'm some symbol." "You are," she said gently. "But symbols don't mean perfection. They mean hope." Jalen stirred his mashed potatoes. "I just want to be a kid." "You will," Cassandra smiled. "But first, you help change the altitude. And once the air's clean, you get to fly wherever you want." Meanwhile, in a sleek boardroom at Sky North Airlines, executives reviewed their Flight Justice Index report in stunned silence. The summary was brutal. 37 flagged incidents of verbal bias in First Class 12 confirmed racial misidentification cases at Gates 5 instances of passenger downgrade retaliation. And then the kicker. Public visibility, high. Immediate action required or risk funding lockout from Veritas-linked capital portfolios. Their CFO nearly choked. "Wait, that means our credit line from Blackstone." "Gone," the chief compliance officer said. "If we don't adopt Mercer protocols by next quarter." The CEO looked around the room, jaw tight. "I want our head of ethics in here, now." Someone mumbled, "She just resigned." In the South Bronx, Loretta, Jalen's grandmother, watched the news on her old TV set, wrapped in a heavy knit shawl, her hand trembling slightly on the remote. She wasn't a tech person, but even she could see what was happening. On screen, a panel discussed the new Passenger Protection Act. Named in part after a 14-year-old black boy from D.C., Jalen Mercer. She smiled. Her grandson, quiet, observant, bookish, had cracked open a system bigger than any adult she knew. She turned the volume up and said to no one, "About damn time." That Sunday, Veritas launched a new public platform, the Passenger Ledger. It allowed travelers to rate their treatment, not just by stars, but by ethics-based categories: respect, fairness, dignity, truthfulness. Within 48 hours, 1.7 million passengers had submitted evaluations. Cassandra watched the heat map bloom like wildfire. More green in some regions, a deep red over others. She turned to her lead engineer. "Ready to publish airline ethics scores?" He looked nervous. "They're going to sue." She didn't blink. "Let them. Data doesn't lie. Silence did." In a quiet hotel room in Houston, Sylvia Harper, former flight attendant, sat alone, staring at a letter from Aerocrest's legal department. Her termination was official. So was the federal investigation. She had refused all interviews, but she had read the thousands of comments online. Some vile, some supportive, most damning. And one stuck with her. "You saw a black child and treated him like a threat. Now the system sees you." Sylvia's hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter and packed it into her suitcase. She had always believed she was fair. She had always believed she was neutral, but belief had blinded her to the pain she caused. And now, her wings were gone. Nighttime, Cassandra's rooftop balcony, Jalen stood with a soda in hand, watching the skyline. "Do you think it's really working?" he asked. Cassandra joined him, nodding slowly. "Justice doesn't land like a jet. It glides, one gust at a time." He smiled faintly. "Kinda poetic." "It's true." They stood in silence for a while, and then Jalen asked, "What happens now?" Cassandra looked out into the dark. "Now?" she said. "Now we fly higher." It was supposed to be just another briefing, a mandatory all-hands meeting at Aerocrest headquarters. All senior flight crew were summoned. The message was blunt. Failure to attend would result in immediate termination. They weren't told why. By 9 a.m., a quiet tension settled over the room like fog. Rows of neatly uniformed pilots, flight attendants, and regional managers filled the auditorium, each nervously eyeing the closed curtain on stage. Then, the lights dimmed. A screen flickered to life, and Cassandra Mercer appeared. Not in person, but on a live stream projected 20 feet tall. She wore a navy suit, calm as ever, her voice clipped, clear, and surgical. "Good morning," she began. "If you're watching this, it means you've made the first step toward choosing reform over removal." A few heads turned. Whispered curses broke the silence. Cassandra didn't blink. "This isn't a diversity seminar. This is a reckoning." Backstage, behind the scenes of the broadcast, a team of Veritas ethics officers observed reactions in real time, using subtle sentiment recognition algorithms to flag hostility, denial, or evasion. It wasn't about policing emotion. It was about identifying who could truly adapt and who couldn't. Cassandra continued. "In the last 10 days, AeroCrest has seen a 21% drop in passenger trust metrics, 3 lawsuits, 1 federal investigation, and a $700 million capital freeze that may extend to our competitors." Murmurs rippled through the auditorium. "You are not being punished for the actions of one crew. You are being measured for how the system has protected those actions for too long." A few attendants shifted uncomfortably. Then, the screen cut to a montage. Clips of real in-flight footage. A woman being told her accent is too much for first class. A child asked to move from a window seat for optics. A disabled passenger's complaint being laughed off. The room went ice cold, and then Jalen's footage. The moment Sylvia Harper snapped, grabbed the boy's arm, and called airport security. The silence was deafening. Some people looked down. Some held back tears. One senior flight attendant clenched her fists, ashamed and furious. Then, Cassandra returned. "You've just watched what the world saw, what the world judged, what investors pulled money over." And then came the line that landed like a hammer. "From this day forward, your behavior isn't judged by customer surveys or internal memos. It's audited by the Mercer Protocol." The Mercer Protocol, as she explained, was a tiered system. Ethical Flight Index, EFI. Every crew member received a dynamic ethics score based on cabin recordings, passenger feedback, and peer reporting. Bias recidivism tracker. Repeat offenses were no longer buried in HR. They were surfaced to an independent body. Transparency clause. All airline partners would have access to anonymized behavior data during hiring. "This is not to destroy careers," Cassandra clarified. "It's to prevent injustice from flying." Then the names began. Veritas had compiled a list. 18 senior crew members flagged for immediate review. Some were known bullies, some silent enablers. All had received prior warnings, and now 0 warnings remained. One by one, their names echoed through the speaker. Captain Ronald Keyes, Flight Leader Dana Shull, Crew Chief Andrew Lockett. Several gasps. One woman broke into tears. Another stormed out. For each, an escort team stood outside. Not to shame them, but to begin accountability interviews, offer transition support, and in some cases, hand over legal notices. This wasn't vengeance. This was surgery. After the meeting, social media exploded. Mercer cuts 18 from AeroCrest crew roster in first-of-its-kind ethical review. Some applaud, others protest, but the Mercer Protocol is here to stay. Passengers report noticeable shift in staff behavior on recent flights. One tweet went viral. "Had the most respectful flight in years today. Attendants actually listened. Thank you, Jalen Mercer." #Mercer Effect. Back at Veritas HQ. Cassandra reviewed the heat map of staff sentiment across all participating airlines. Most were green. A few regions, like the Dallas hub, still blinked red. "We'll need to reinforce training there," she told her director of field ethics. "What if they refuse?" Cassandra looked up, cool and sharp. "Then they lose license to fly." Meanwhile, in a modest apartment in Baltimore, Sylvia Harper packed her things in silence. She had refused her exit interview, refused counseling, refused everything except the final check and the termination paperwork. She wasn't ready to reckon with what she'd become, but deep down, she knew. She'd lost her job not because of a boy, but because of a system she upheld through indifference. For the first time in years, she felt small. And maybe that was the beginning. Cassandra's final message. That evening, Cassandra released a public statement to passengers. This is only the beginning. The Mercer Protocol is not a punishment. It is a promise. A promise that every person, no matter their seat, no matter their skin, will be treated with humanity at 30,000 feet. If your airline won't promise that, don't board. Jalen watched her speech at home with Loretta. He turned to his grandmother and said quietly, "Do you think things will actually change?" She didn't look away from the screen. They already did. It started in Sao Paulo. A Brazilian news outlet reported that an Afro-Brazilian family had been bumped from a business-class flight because the airline claimed their documentation seemed suspicious. One problem: they were diplomats, and they were on their way to Geneva for a UN Human Rights Summit. The clip went viral. What happened next was unexpected. The footage got flagged, not by reporters, not by passengers, but by the Mercer Index, which had quietly been expanded to 6 international airline partners through a shared ethics consortium. In less than 24 hours, the incident was logged, categorized, and translated into 6 languages. Within 72 hours, the airline lost 2 major code-share agreements and a $120 million tourism board deal. No protests, no hashtags, no screaming matches, just metrics, just consequences, and it was only the beginning. London, Heathrow Airport. A flight attendant with 30 years of experience was gently pulled aside by HR. Her bias flag had been triggered 3 times in 2 months. Once for mocking a Nigerian passenger's name, once for making a joke about a hijab, and once for deliberately seating a black couple near the lavatory when better seats were available. She wasn't fired. She was offered a choice: step down with a full severance package, complete a 12-week program under the Global Passenger Justice Initiative, co-developed by Veritas and the European Commission. She chose the latter. By week 3, she wept in a training session. "I didn't know I was part of the problem," she whispered. Her instructor replied, "Now you do. So what will you become next?" In Japan, ANA quietly reached out to Veritas. They wanted access to the Flight Justice Index, not just for ethical compliance, but as a brand strategy. Their internal data showed Gen Z travelers were 68% more likely to choose airlines based on treatment of minorities rather than ticket price. A board meeting followed. One executive warned, "This is an American problem. Our culture is different." Another responded, "This is a human problem, and it's already here." They voted. No protests, no hashtags, no screaming matches. Unanimously. Back in the US, Cassandra Mercer stood before the World Aviation Reform Summit in New York, facing an audience of CEOs, transport ministers, and ethics scholars. She didn't open with data. She opened with a story. "My nephew Jalen was treated like a criminal for sitting in a first-class seat he paid for. His crime? Being a quiet, observant black boy in America. One flight attendant called security, and in doing so, she triggered a domino of reckoning. Not for herself, but for the system that created her." She paused. "This is not about firing bad apples. This is about rewiring the tree, about asking why certain fruit gets bruised before it even ripens." Applause rippled through the hall. Some stood. A few wiped tears. And then she announced it. As of next quarter, the Flight Justice Index will become open source. Any airline can adopt it, free of charge. But if they choose not to, passengers will know exactly why. The room fell silent. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Meanwhile, in Nairobi, a young Kenyan woman named Adira posted a TikTok. "Just flew on a Flight Justice certified airline. First time in my life I felt like a customer, not a suspect. Thank you, whoever made this system." The video hit 3 million views in 48 hours. Comments flooded in. Was it real? Did they actually respect you? How can I check which airlines have this? Please bring this to Australia. We need it. Veritas watched. and responded. A new public-facing site launched, flyfairnow.org, listing all airlines using the Mercer protocol. Within a week, passenger bookings shifted by 14%, favoring justice-compliant carriers. Cassandra's office. Late evening, Jalen sat on the edge of the window, watching the lights of the city flicker like constellations. "You think it's actually working?" he asked quietly. Cassandra turned from her laptop, tired but smiling. "I think the skies are quieter." He raised an eyebrow. "Quieter? Less crying, less shouting, less fear. You'd be amazed what you don't hear when people are treated like they belong." He let that settle, then said, "But what about the ones still hiding? The ones still acting like nothing's changed?" Cassandra leaned back. "Oh, they feel it. They're just hoping we'll stop." "But we won't." She shook her head. "Not now, not ever." And in a small cafe in Atlanta, a former gate agent named Kevin sipped his coffee in silence. He had once joked about a black teenager's hoodie being too thug for first class. It got caught on the Mercer Index. He didn't lose his job, but he got suspended, retrained, and reevaluated. He hated it. Until his 9-year-old daughter asked him last week, "Dad, do you think people get scared of me when I wear my hair natural?" He froze. That was the moment it clicked. Now, he was back at work, kinder, quieter, more aware. When a nervous passenger approached him the other day, asking if she was in the right line, he didn't sigh or snap. He smiled and walked her to the right gate, not because he was afraid of a camera, but because he remembered how it felt to realize he had been part of someone's worst memory, and he wanted to stop being that guy. Final scene. Global skies. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a flight attendant gently kneels to help a crying child. In Tokyo, a pilot offers a sincere apology to a disabled traveler for past negligence. In Johannesburg, an airline CEO reviews his company's new equity policies, based not on politics, but on dignity. And in DC, a boy named Jalen walks out of school with his backpack slung over one shoulder. No cameras, no attention. Just a quiet boy who once got dragged from a first-class seat and helped the entire sky remember what justice feels like. They didn't see it coming. Not when Veritas went international. Not when passengers started asking about Mercer-compliant airlines. Not even when bookings dropped 9% across 3 major carriers. They ignored the early memos, dismissed the think pieces, and laughed when the Flight Justice Index trended on TikTok. But they weren't laughing now, because in less than 6 weeks, Veritas had triggered a $7.2 billion shift in global aviation partnerships, and some of the old giants were panicking. Inside Sky North HQ, Dallas, Texas CEO Everett Blaine slammed a manila folder down on the conference table. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "Another charter cancellation? That's the 3rd this week," his CMO tried to explain. "It's not us, it's perception. We're being labeled as hostile to reform." Blaine narrowed his eyes. "We gave out those diversity lanyards last quarter. People want policy, not merch," muttered someone from HR. Blaine stood. "That Mercer woman's turned this into a witch hunt. And now the government's watching. The FAA's sniffing around. DIOT wants statements. Hell, even the EU just flagged our hiring metrics." Silence. Then the CFO spoke. "We either join them or start bleeding contracts." Blaine's jaw twitched. "You think I'm going to let some nonprofit tell me how to run my airline?" In contrast, Air Genesis, Atlanta. Their CEO, Delia Brooks, sat in a quiet meeting with Cassandra Mercer. No cameras, no press. "I've reviewed your data," Delia said. "It's airtight. More than that, it's necessary." Cassandra waited. Delia smiled. "We're in, quietly at first, but we'll phase it in by Q3. Cassandra nodded. Delia's voice lowered. "Everett Blaine's gonna declare war on you." Cassandra didn't flinch. "He already did. I'm just not playing his game. The war goes public. 3 days later, Sky North issued a press release accusing Veritas of data manipulation, wokeness for profit, and undermining passenger confidence through fear-mongering. It trended for all the wrong reasons. Because within hours, Veritas responded with timestamps, receipts, and redacted internal Sky North incident logs. Everything was verified by third-party compliance monitors. Then came the blow no one expected. The Department of Transportation issued a statement. We recognize the Mercer Protocol as a significant tool in restoring public trust in commercial aviation. All carriers are encouraged to engage with Veritas or develop equivalent mechanisms. Mic drop. Meanwhile, public sentiment shifts. A young black teacher named Reggie posted a thread on X. Sky North profiled me 3 times in 2 flights. Called me agitated when I asked for a window seat I paid for. I reported it, nothing happened. This week, I flew Air Genesis. The flight attendant apologized for accidentally calling me Sir instead of Dr. Hill. That's the difference. One airline guesses who you are, the other respects who you tell them you are. The post went viral. 2.4 million views. Retweeted by a congresswoman. Quoted by a major investor. And that investor? He was Sky North's largest minority shareholder. In the boardroom. Fracture. Sky North's internal board meeting turned ugly. Half the room wanted to sue Veritas. The other half wanted to settle quietly and adopt the protocol. The VP of Strategy stood up. "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't about PR. This is about existence. If Gen Z and millennial travelers blacklist us, we're done in 5 years. Period." But Blaine wasn't listening. He was dialing his legal team. Back at Veritas HQ, Jalen sat beside Cassandra, looking at the dashboard screen. 15 million visitors to the Flyfair Now site this week, he said. 78 airlines analyzed, Cassandra added. 13 flagged for critical review. He leaned back. And Sky North? She smiled faintly. Bleeding bookings. Fast. Then, more softly. But that's not the win. Jalen glanced at her. She continued. The win is when no one needs to know your name to treat you like you matter. He nodded. And if they push harder? Her reply was calm. Then they'll find out what it means to lose quietly. The Whisper Network emerges unbeknownst to the public. 6 mid-tier carriers had begun collaborating in secret. Their fear? That Veritas would judge them unfairly. Their plan? Launch a counter-report discrediting the Flight Justice Index as unscalable and politically motivated. But the email chain leaked. A whistleblower from inside Horizon Air forwarded the entire thread to an aviation ethics journalist. The headline read, 6 airlines try to bury passenger justice, get buried by their own employees. By the end of the day, 3 CEOs had issued apologies. 2 stepped down. And the 6th filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. Cassandra's speech at the United Nations. Let me be clear, she said to a room full of global delegates. We're not anti-airline, we're anti-abuse. She let that breathe. The day my nephew was dragged by police from a seat he paid for, something broke. But what's happening now? That's not revenge, that's repair. And then she ended with the line that would define a movement. We're not here to shame companies. We're here to make sure the skies don't shame people. Standing ovation. Even from nations that had once opposed the initiative. Final scene. Back in the skies. Jalen was boarding a flight alone for the first time since the incident. The gate agent smiled warmly. Have a great flight, Mr. Mercer. He blinked. She'd used his name. Properly. With respect. On board, the flight attendant checked his seat number and gently said, Let me know if you need anything, sir. He sat down quietly. No fear, no flinch, no feeling of what if, just peace. He glanced out the window. Clouds drifted by like soft armor. Somewhere behind them, the old system was still grumbling, still fighting to exist. But up here, justice had altitude. The Capitol hearing room was packed. Every seat was filled. Cameras from every major network were rolling. Social media influencers live-streamed. Reporters whispered, but the loudest sound in the room was silence. Because today wasn't just about one airline. It was about what flying meant in America. At the center of it all, Everett Blaine, CEO of Sky North Airlines, sat stiffly at the witness table. Next to him, his lawyers. Behind him, a carefully curated PR team. But across the aisle sat Cassandra Mercer, calm and poised. And beside her, Jalen, not saying much, but his quiet presence was louder than any speech. The chairwoman spoke first. Mr. Blaine, are you aware that Sky North has had 27 flagged incidents of racial discrimination in the past 18 months? All verified by independent reviewers? Blaine cleared his throat. With respect, those numbers are inflated. Many of those were isolated misunderstandings, and we've taken steps to deny, delay, and deflect. The chairwoman cut in. Blaine faltered. The room shifted. Then it was Cassandra's turn. She stood. No notes, no slides, just her voice. When my nephew was dragged off a plane, no one asked him his name. No one asked if he belonged there. They just saw his skin and made assumptions, and for years this has been normal. She looked Blaine in the eye. Your airline normalized it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cassandra continued. What we've done with Veritas isn't radical, it's responsible. It's what your companies should have done decades ago. She turned toward the panel. Today's not about policy, it's about people. And if your boardrooms can't remember that, then maybe they shouldn't be flying planes filled with them. Applause broke out despite the official rules. The chairwoman didn't stop it. And then came the twist. Congressman Martinez, a soft-spoken former prosecutor, leaned forward. Mr. Blaine, are you aware that the Department of Transportation has completed an independent audit of your internal emails? Blaine blinked. We've cooperated. Martinez interrupted. Let the record show that on June 8th, you referred to the Mercer Protocol as, and I quote, a nuisance we can ignore until the news cycle dies. Gasp. The room froze. Blaine turned pale. Then Martinez added, and on July 1st, you approved a memo instructing gate staff to delay incident reports until passengers left the airport, reducing the chance of investigation. A stunned silence settled over the room. Then chaos. Reporters scrambled. Cameras zoomed in. Phones lit up. Outside the building, the crowd was growing. Former passengers, activists, pilots, flight attendants in Veritas blue scarves. Signs read, "Respect shouldn't be first class only. Passengers, not profits. We remember Jalen." Back inside, Blaine was sweating. The chairwoman turned to him. Mr. Blaine, the committee is recommending a full review of Sky North's federal operating certifications. You may wish to retain separate counsel. Translation: You're done. Later that afternoon, Veritas held a press conference on the Capitol steps. Cassandra stood before a forest of microphones, her voice steady. Today isn't about taking someone down. It's about lifting an entire system up, and we're not finished. Jalen stood quietly beside her. Someone from the crowd shouted, "Jalen, anything you want to say?" He stepped forward, paused, then just said, "Thank you for seeing me." That was all. And somehow, that was everything. Epilogue. 2 months later, Sky North's CEO had resigned. Their stock had cratered. They'd agreed to adopt the Flight Justice Index, under Veritas supervision. Meanwhile, 14 other airlines voluntarily signed on. Veritas launched a new program training flight crews in implicit bias, empathy, and intervention. Cassandra was nominated for the National Civil Honor Award. Jalen returned to school in D.C. Quiet, but no longer invisible. And every time a kid like him sat down in a seat he paid for, the skies felt just a little bit safer. The world didn't change all at once. It never does. But sometimes, It only takes one flight, one boy, one name, to force the world to look up. Within days of the Capitol hearing, international headlines exploded. American teen's flight incident sparks global aviation review. The Guardian. Mercer Protocol. Considered in Canada, France, South Africa. Le Monde. Jalen Mercer, the boy who grounded a giant. Time magazine. In London, Heathrow Airport executives scheduled an emergency summit. In Frankfurt, Lufthansa's ethics board began auditing its passenger complaint records. In Dubai, Emirates quietly reached out to Veritas. And in Tokyo, a silent moment of reflection was observed by Japan Airlines staff after an anonymous crew member translated the entire Veritas charter and taped it in their break room with one note. Kono shounin hashitorin de wa nakatta. He wasn't alone. Back in the US, Cassandra had traded courtrooms for conference rooms. She wasn't chasing justice anymore. Now she was shaping policy. She had already met with the FAA, DOT, and several airline coalitions. Each meeting ended the same way. This is no longer optional. The Mercer Protocol had become more than a system. It was a movement. What began as a quiet pilot program across a few US hubs had now expanded into an international alliance. Airlines for Passenger Justice. They didn't just want to avoid lawsuits. They wanted trust. They wanted longevity. And for the first time in years, passengers started to notice. On a flight from Atlanta to Denver, an elderly black woman boarded in Zone 3. As she moved down the aisle, a flight attendant paused and gently asked, "Would you like help with your bag, ma'am?" Not in a fake, PR-approved voice. Not because someone was watching, but because things had changed. And she felt it. She sat down in her seat and whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you, Jalen." Meanwhile, Jalen himself was still trying to live a normal life. But that wasn't easy when strangers approached him in grocery stores, when reporters emailed his school, when passengers whispered his name in terminals like it meant safety. He didn't want attention. He wanted fairness. And slowly, the world was learning the difference. One afternoon, Cassandra called him. "Hey, we've just gotten confirmation from Geneva," she said, smiling through the phone. "The International Civil Aviation Organization is integrating Mercer Protocol compliance into their passenger rights review." Jalen blinked. "The actual ICAO?" "Yep, your name's going in the footnotes." He exhaled. "That's crazy." Cassandra laughed. "You'd better get used to it." Back at Veritas HQ, Loretta was helping review incoming letters. Not emails, not tweets, actual letters. Some were typed, many were handwritten. Some came with photos. Others just said, "Because of you, my daughter flew without fear. My father was a Tuskegee airman. He would have been proud. I didn't speak up when they mocked my accent, but now I will." One letter stood out. It was from a retired Swiss pilot, now 83 years old. It read, "In 1962, I flew for Pan Am. I saw how passengers of color were treated, and I stayed quiet. Today, I write with tears because I saw a boy speak louder with silence than I ever did with years of flying. Thank you for giving us old men a reason to believe something better is still possible." Jalen read the letter twice, and then again, and then just sat still. That night, as planes soared overhead and a full moon painted the sky silver, Jalen stood at his bedroom window. He thought about the day it all started. The look on Sylvia Harper's face, the cold grip on his arm, the ache of not being believed. But now, the skies felt different. Not perfect, but no longer untouchable. He turned away from the window and texted his aunt. "You were right," she replied instantly. "About what?" Jalen smiled. "One flight can change everything." The clouds outside Jalen's window were soft, pale blue. Not that he was watching the clouds this time. He wasn't gripping the seatbelt in fear. He wasn't glancing at the flight attendant every 2 seconds. He wasn't wondering if someone was about to ask if he was in the wrong seat. No. Today, he sat in seat 3A, first class. Calm, still, taller somehow, even without moving. Across the aisle, Cassandra Mercer tucked away her laptop. She leaned over and whispered, "You good?" Jalen nodded. This flight was different. It wasn't about arrival anymore. It was about everything it took to be allowed to arrive. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Sky North Flight 1182 to Washington, D.C. We're honored to be carrying some special guests today. Among them, Cassandra Mercer, founder of the Veritas Initiative, and her nephew, Jalen Mercer, the inspiration behind the Mercer Protocol, now adopted globally." Polite applause fluttered through the cabin. Jalen felt every pair of eyes turn toward him. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just nodded. That was enough. The plane lifted off. For a moment, the sound of engines muffled everything. Then came the memories, the yelling, the cuffs, the waiting room, the look in Sylvia Harper's eyes when she called him a threat. He hadn't forgotten. He wouldn't. But now, those memories had space to breathe. They didn't sit on his chest anymore. Across the country, things had changed. At LAX, passengers saw a new logo posted above check-in counters, certified by Veritas Ethics Standard. At JFK, a white woman offered to switch seats with a black father and son so they could sit together. The boy smiled like it was normal. At a small airport in Birmingham, Alabama, a flight attendant corrected a gate agent, not with hostility, but with care. We don't talk to people like that anymore. Not because they feared punishment, because they had learned. Sylvia Harper, meanwhile, was long gone from Sky North. Officially resigned. Unofficially, quietly blacklisted. Not because of a vendetta, but because every airline that signed onto the Mercer Protocol now ran background reviews with a new metric: behavior under pressure. She didn't pass. Back at Veritas HQ, Cassandra stood before a wall of maps. Each pin marked a change, a policy shift, a crew retraining, a CEO resignation. But she wasn't tracking vengeance. She was measuring momentum. And it was real. That afternoon, Jalen visited a small school library in Baltimore. He wasn't there to give a speech. He was there to read. A group of third graders sat cross-legged as he opened a book. "The boy in this story loved planes," he began. He read slowly, carefully. When he finished, a girl raised her hand. "Is that boy you?" Jalen looked down at the book, smiled. "Maybe." The kids laughed. A teacher nearby wiped her eyes. Later that night, Cassandra joined him on a quiet rooftop in D.C. The skyline buzzed in the distance. "You ever think," Jalen said, "if none of it had happened, I'd still just be a kid with a backpack?" "You still are," Cassandra replied. "You just happen to carry more now." Jalen nodded slowly. But not alone anymore. She handed him an envelope. Inside, a letter from the president, a thank you, an invitation to speak at the Passenger Dignity Summit in Geneva next spring. He looked stunned. "I'm just a kid." "Exactly why they want you," Cassandra said. "You remind them who matters." Months passed. News cycles shifted. People moved on. But the protocols stayed. The culture stayed. The expectations stayed. And every time a flight took off without incident, without harm, someone remembered why. One evening, Loretta watched a new Veritas ad air on TV. A little black boy climbs onto a plane with his grandmother. A white pilot bends down, fist bumps him. Voiceover. "He's not the future, he's the present. At Veritas, every seat is earned, but every passenger is honored." Fade out. Back in Jalen's room, above his desk, was a single framed photo. Him sitting in seat 3A, looking out the window. No smile, no frown. Just calm. Underneath it, a quote etched in silver. "You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to be right and ready." And that was the final truth. Not every fight needs fists. Not every hero needs a podium. Sometimes, the strongest revolution comes from not backing down. And sometimes, the most powerful statement is silence. And before we end this journey, we have a question for you. Have you ever witnessed someone stay silent, but their silence changed everything? Tell us your story in the comments, or just tell us where you're watching from. We read every word, because here at Telltales, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply waits until the world listens.